Getting gear is one of the most addictive parts of any ARPG, and Diablo is no different. Across all of your gear slots and across all the many gear affixes, the question has probably cropped up in your mind as to which gear affixes are the best ones. What should you even prioritize and where? Well, in this video today, I want to go over the best gear affixes, or at least the best stats to focus on when you're playing Diablo 4. Now, a lot of this information will, of course, be very build dependent, and please do not beat yourself up trying to min-max every single item that you're wearing. You spent $70 for this game, so enjoy it however you see fit. What I'm aiming to do here is to give you a guide on what affixes have a higher value for all of your many characters you will undoubtedly make in this game. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things here is by upfronting the information in my video so that you can decide if it's the right one for you. So, the best affixes, roughly in this order, are vulnerability damage increase, crit damage and crit chance increase, armor or damage reduction increase, and then whatever stat is important for your build. Take my blood necro, for example. I want tons of overpowered damage, or maybe blood damage, etc. But the first three things are the most important. Also, you want to make sure that the armor value on your character sheet shows 88% damage reduction when you hover over it. That's it. That's the primary focus of this video. There's a lot more on how each gear slot corresponds to those affixes and where to focus what, but if that's all you wanted to know, then please feel free to shut the video down. I always want to make sure you get back to playing and enjoying the game as fast as possible. If you are heading out though, please don't forget to like, comment, and/or subscribe. Each one of those things does help me out in a very, very huge way. Also, I have a massive playlist filled with all my guides and how-tos for Diablo 4 linked in the description as well as the end of this video if you need help with other subjects. Lastly, you can quickly navigate to any part of the video that interests you the most using the chapters in both the timeline and the description. And remember when I said lastly, I lied to you. The true lastly, please don't forget to follow me on Twitch, where I will be streaming Diablo 4 tomorrow, Saturday, all the many days in the future. But let's get started here on which gear affixes are the best in Diablo 4. Loading into the game, let's talk about crit and vulnerable damage and why they're so important, why they're your biggest damage bonuses here. So when we go to our materials and stats, we have all of our offensive stats. And the way that this game works is you have a series of damage buckets. You might have heard people say, oh, that's additive or that's multiplicative. And you might know what those actual words, additive and multiplicative, mean, but you might not understand how it really applies to the game. So what we're going to talk about here is why vulnerable damage and why crit damage is so important. Vulnerable damage probably chiefly amongst the two. So vulnerable damage here, you can see it says that it's extra damage granted against vulnerable enemies, has a base value of 20%. My current stats, items, paragon points, whatever, give me 73 vulnerable damage bonus. Conversely, we have our crit strike damage bonus. This has a base value, but mine is at 129. Of course, though, the difference between these is that crit strike damage only triggers when a crit strike triggers, versus vulnerable damage is against anything that has been marked as vulnerable. Why vulnerable damage is so important here is that this exists in its own damage bucket, meaning it is its own number that will multiply all of the many different types of damage bonuses that apply to your overall damage value. What that means is, that's like a bunch of like abstract words, right? Let's just look at your weapon damage, and let's assume for a second here your weapon, your base damage is 2,000. I'm just going to use an even number here. Well, a lot of factors come into this, like your speed, your attack speed bonus, your DPS, all these individual little tiny things here. And kind of, I really even wouldn't look at this as a real good indication of anything. And then your skill will do a percentage of this damage. After that, that number gets multiplied by your crit strike damage, by your if a crit strike triggers. That's important, right? If a crit strike triggers, let's assume it did for this example, and let's assume that the thing's vulnerable. So you got your 2,000, and then whatever percentage of the skill value times crit strike damage times your vulnerable damage, and then you've got all these things down here. Damage versus elites, versus slowed, versus close, versus distant, while healthy with core, all this stuff from blood orbs. These are in their own, not individual, but cumulative damage bucket. So what people mean when they say additive is that they're saying that if I were to get 100% additional damage versus distant, that's an additive value to all of these kind of extra damage values. Versus if I got 100% additional vulnerable damage, it's an additional bit of multiplicative damage in the total equation, right? If I'm saying A times B times C times C, times D, I'm increasing B rather than adding more to D. So taking that total number of one value and increasing it, it allows me to deal far more damage than just simply adding more to the little bits of a part of a number. And that's kind of very confusing in and of itself. But the biggest thing you need to understand here between vulnerable and crit strike damage is that vulnerable is an on or off switch. Things aren't a percentage chance to be vulnerable unless a skill says that. It's like, oh, 30% chance to make them vulnerable. Take, for example, here, the corpse tendrils. If it's given this, enemies damaged by corpse tendrils are made vulnerable. It's just turned on. So now when I do damage to them, I get a multiplicative bonus of 73%. So if my total amount of damage was just say 1,000, well, now I'm doing 73% more damage, right? I'm doing a ton more damage. Versus crit strike, if I have it being in its own bucket and being multiplicative is great, but if my crit strike chance isn't high enough, or if I don't have skills that increase the crit strike chance or paragon points or gear, then I never get to take advantage of this multiplicative bucket. So it's why vulnerable is so important. It's why people always say you should stack vulnerable in your build in one way or another. But what's important here, what kind of defeats what I've said about everything so far is, if your build does not use vulnerable, or if it does not focus on crit strike, then it's not important. Here's an example. My build is an overpower build. I am not focusing on vulnerable damage anymore. I used to, but I'm focusing solely on how much overpower damage I do because it's kind of a weird kind of sideways bucket to everything. So I have eschewed my vulnerable damage. Crit strike damage still is important to me because my overpowers canned crit strike. Conversely, if I was playing, say, a firewall sorcerer who cannot crit strike chance or crit strike damage with their damage over time abilities, which is the biggest draw of their build, then it is wasteful for me to invest points into these two aspects. I'd instead want to put it into vulnerable damage. Since I'm playing a sorcerer, I can use my Frost Nova and just guarantee vulnerable damage to things, which I will then do increased damage to. So that's what I mean. These are both really important characteristics, but they are going to come down to how your build plays with them. And it's why your build stat is an underlying conversation throughout this entire video. If you're playing, say, a rogue, well, rogue has a ton of vuln damage and they rely really heavily on lucky hit. So everything that I'm going to talk about maybe doesn't apply to you if your rogue build is very heavily geared towards your lucky hit chance. You want to boost this ability up as much as you can. So that's a really big set of offensive stats I wanted to talk about because it's the biggest thing that everyone focuses on. Woody Joe, Rax, Mr. Llama, all of them are talking about how vuln is a huge thing because it's its own damage multiplicative bucket. Riker has a whole cool video on it. So let's talk now about some defensive stats, which are equally as important, that will really push you into the top tiers of the game. So across all of your gear, it's important to look at one value, your armor. Now, in previous Diablos, that's not been as important as resistances. And resistances in this game are absolutely garbage. They will probably be balanced in the most recent patch. They've said that they are looking at it. But just to kind of give you an idea of why they're not so great, is take a look at cold resistance. What you get here, you don't get 40% damage resistance against cold, you get half of that value. So it reduces incoming cold damage by 20%, makes up 50% of your initial damage reduction from cold, with the remainder contributed by armor. That's why armor is just so much more important, because it takes so much stat resistance to actually reduce that damage. So your armor is the way you gotta go. I know in the intro I had said that the value you want to look for is 88%. I lied, it's 85%. So what you look for here is when you hover over armor, reduces physical damage taken from enemies of equal level by X value. This value is going to change every level. Let's say my armor value of 5,982 did not change, and I got 3 levels. That percentage drops. So you need to kind of constantly be pushing your gear up with its armor. It's not exactly that easy of an equation. It's not going to be a drastic drop, but it's still, you want to make sure you're pushing your armor value up. So this can show you 95 or 100%, but it will cap out at 85%, because this tells you reduces physical damage taken from enemies of equal level by 66%. So once we traverse into something that is a higher level than my level, so I am currently 72. So if something is 78 and my value says 92, then I will get less actual physical damage reduction, right? Because it's a higher level than me. But that overflow allows me to have a way to kind of still stay at 85%. And damage reduction happens sequentially. So for every piece of damage reduction you have in your build, it will happen piecemeal. So let's take a generic number like 1000, for example. Well, with my armor of 66% damage reduction, or reduced physical damage, it's not exactly damage reduction, but it's effectively damage reduction. I take 1000 damage. Well, this reduces it by 660, right? So I'm taking 340. Well, then, you know what? Let's assume that they're actually close. Well, now that number gets reduced by an additional 32%. The resulting number, because let's assume I'm also fortified, then gets reduced by 16%. It is another multiplicative defensive bonus for you. So stacking damage reduction in the instances that make sense for your character is crucial. My character is always close and is always fortified. So these damage reduction values help to maintain my actual well-being of my character. If I was playing, say, a pen shot rogue, well, damage reduction from distant is probably what I would want, or any kind of damage reduction that's going to benefit the way my character plays, how the build steps in and out of combat. You have also flat situational damage reduction, right? That happens from certain abilities. Let's see here, damage reduction, and we'll scroll out. Okay, that's not it. Let's just look at this one, right? So hitting an enemy with Reap increases your damage reduction by 15% for 2 seconds. So that is a situational damage reduction. And you also will get damage reduction from Paragon points, from individual glyphs, stuff like that. Anytime you get a damage reduction, it turns on in this little scroll here if you have it or not. So there's damage reduction from distant. I don't have any damage reduction from distant, so it is a 0 here. So you want to focus on damage reduction in armor, because that is what keeps you alive in the later portions of the game. The earlier you start to focus on it, the more ahead of the curve you're going to be. And it's why I also use a shield in my specific build, because I like the block chance followed by blocked damage reduction. It's an additional DR that gets folded into the equation to help reduce the amount of damage I just do not need to take. Another quick little thing I do want to talk about in this kind of defensive section is life. Anytime you see a piece of armor here that says it increases your life, oh, here you go, increases max life, that's crucial. You always want to increase your max life. No armor piece is going to increase life percentage. That would be usually from a passive or a Paragon point, but I just want to show you what that does. Anytime something says life percentage, it increases this value right here that says you have 2,654 base life. So a 5% gain on that is like, I don't know, 100 some, versus max life goes to the total in this bubble right there. So it's important to look at those things. And let me show you just a quick example of how important armor is. So my current character here, that's not what I meant to do. He's got 5,982 armor, which is 66% DR. Let's just put on this one piece. It's 88 less armor. That brought me down to 64. That's 2% less. I'm going to put on all this junk armor, and now I'm down to 43%. So focusing on high item levels, high item power with high armor, and also high armor affixes allows you to get substantially more damage reduction into your build. One more thing I want to point out here with armor is that anytime a piece says that it increases, say on this, here, I'll put it over here, 4.6% total armor is increased from this, or this chest piece. My current one says it increases by 5.6, but it has 1451. If I remove this chest piece, we've got 5,982, right? That's not a 1451 difference. So Any bonus that you get from the affix that increases armor is represented here, not on the actual tooltip. Just be mindful of that. And it's important that you get your armor really up to snuff on your chest and legs, because they have the highest armor rolls in their individual slots, chest being the chief one amongst it, right? And when you upgrade your items, this kind of all plays together across all of the stuff we've talked about so far. It increases the bonuses to your affixes. So upgrading them is crucial because it increases item power, which conversely will then increase the amount that an affix rolls. And I can show you that by really quickly jumping on down here to the blacksmith. So you won't do this for every single piece of gear. You'll do this for the pieces of gear you want to hold on to. And if you are not in World Tier 4, that is nothing. You only want to do this to stuff that is ancestral, or, well, there's no better. You just want to do it to ancestral. So let's just take this piece of armor here and let's look at this. This says 9.5% damage reduction while fortified. Well, when I upgrade it, it goes to 10.4. And this is why that is so important. You want these great gear affixes because you then want to increase them. So remember, this base was 9.5. Well, let's just do this for the video. We increased it all the way. Now it is up to 13.9. We got almost a full 4% increase here. No, that's 5%. I have terrible math skills, but clearly you can see it's increased quite a bit with the damage reduction. So upgrading things is paramount to maximizing your affix gain on each and every item. Now, the last thing I want to talk about are the individual slots and how you can maximize, again, your gear affixes, because the best gear affixes are not going to roll on everything. So you're going to head on over here to d4builds.gg. At the top, you'll see database, and you'll go over here into gear affixes. And let's go ahead and just select a class. I'm a necromancer, so I'll be clicking this. So this is going to show me for my class what all of the affixes are on the helm. Okay, cool. I see that these are all of the individual ones that can roll on helm. Well, we talked about vuln damage. It's not here on the helm, not here on the chest. It's on no piece other than your ring and your weapon. So that is what is crucial to know here. You know, I talked about vuln. It's really good. You really want to get it, but you're going to want to get it on items that can actually roll the affix. If you're playing a rogue, well, then you should probably be using a crossbow because that's going to add vuln damage. You should also probably be using the gem that increases your vulnerable damage, right? You can get a chunk of damage added to your build by simply socketing in emeralds into your weapons, because that is a substantial percentage of individual damage bucket additions that you're making. So make sure you're adding vulnerable damage to your build that does benefit from it. Conversely though, let's take a look at critical strike. So critical strike damage, well, we're going to get it on the weapon here, right? So that is another important thing here, right? We're going to get it on our ring. And that is another thing too. The ring is the only item that rolls for crit strike chance. So it's why rings are very important to get both crit strike chance and crit strike damage on. Crit strike jamage? I like that. So crit strike chance and damage both roll on your ring. And then outside of those things, for your individual slots and items, you then will get specific skill bonuses. So for a necromancer, for example, the helm will give me both my curses, ranks of Decrepify and ranks of Iron Maiden. But if I look at this for, say, a druid, well, that's all my companions and my resource. So this is how you kind of custom build out and cater which ones are going to work the best for you. Crowd control duration, reduce cooldown reduction is crucial on all builds. How it fits into your build is going to be dependent upon what you are really focusing on. I've talked about vuln, I've talked about crit and armor and damage reduction, but cooldown reduction and any resource reduction are absolutely crucial. If you're playing a rogue, basic skill attack speed is probably going to be pretty crucial for you, depending upon if your build actually uses a basic skill attack speed. My build does not, but it also doesn't really benefit from attack speed, period. So some gear affixes are not going to make the most sense for you. You know, like I said, basic skill attack speed is just not going to work for my necromancer. So look at those things for your individual build. Chest armor here for my Necromancer, it's how I'm going to get individual damage bonuses that pertain to what my builds can be. Physical, shadow, and then blood, bone, darkness, and summoning skill damage. Those things are all really important through your chest. Your gloves for Necro are going to be all of your core skills. I think every single class, their gloves are their core skills. Your pants, in this example, are my macabre skills, but Blood Mist, Corpse Explosion, and Bone Prison. And then boots are going to be crucial because boots and your amulet are the only two that can roll movement speed. If you're playing a Necromancer, that's massive. If you're playing something that's quite slow, movement speed is going to be crucial for you. What you're also going to see here are other ranks, Bone Spirit and Corpse Tendrils. So just make sure you're looking at individual classes and which skills roll on what. Amulets have a wealth of ranks on all of your passives or on specific groupings of skills. Corpse, Curse, or Macabre skills are all buffed with ranks from our amulet. So just, again, I can't stress this enough. Really make sure you're looking through this to make sure you can get the most out of things. And you want to look too at weapons for their implicit damage bonuses. It's why I tell people in the build that I'm using with my Necromancer to use a one-handed sword. But if I'm also telling you about for my pen shot build, I'm going to tell you to use probably a crossbow for 40% vulnerable damage bonus. Or if you're, say, using a scythe, that's going to give you life on kill. So looking at these implicits for your weapon, it's going to help add a little bit of extra damage for you. I would say overpower damage for my overpower build, but I can't use a mace as a Necromancer. So, you know, fuck me, right? But the only thing that you should probably be avoiding right now in its current state in the game is resistance. That's probably the one stat that is a bit of a pitfall from previous games. There are definitely other stats that are not going to be useful to you too, like maybe crowd impaired duration reduced. Maybe that's just not as crucial for you, and I don't think I'd ever really roll for it. Or shrine buff duration is another one I can really think of I'd probably never ever want to use. Those are going to be personal, of course, but I think by and large, shrine buff duration is a hard pass. In the future, resistances might change, but as of right now, I would completely steer clear from them. So hopefully this gives you a really good idea on what the best gear affixes are. It, again, as I've said so many times in this video, comes down to vuln, crit strike, as well as armor and damage reduction by adding in your life bonuses. Stat bonus, I'd also steer clear of unless it was just kind of already on the armor and you just kind of want to stick with it. But looking at damage reduction from specific instances that fit your build are going to be crucial for you. Making sure you take advantage of any and all little thing like movement speed that only rolls on those boots and those amulets, or those crit chance that is only on your rings. Making sure you just fine tune where your gear affixes are going on your individual build. And you can also kind of use this site too to go all the way top of here to go to your builds, like a build planner, and just choose item stats to kind of find out what item stats roll on specific pieces to kind of build out for yourself to say, well, you know what? How do I build this out so that I can make it work for my barbarian? Well, let's find, oh, okay, well, here's total life or total armor right there. Well, let's see if we get like, you know what? Let's get max fury, and let's get, I'm doing a rupture build, like stuff like that. You can kind of go through this and kind of make it, kind of build it out for yourself so you can have it all set up so that you kind of know what your affixes are going to be in what locations. D4 Builds is probably my favorite resource, and I always recommend people to use it. But if you have any questions about your affixes and which ones to get, what's really going to benefit your build, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. I'll do the best to answer for what you're doing. I might not know 100%, but I can give you at least a rough general idea of where to go. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today, though. Have a good one and take care.